Hello, I'm Hilary McClure, Multimedia Director at Cybercrime Magazine. Welcome to Let's Talk SOC, a Cybercrime Magazine podcast series brought to you by Secureworks, a leader in cybersecurity, empowering security and IT teams worldwide to accelerate effective security operations. Joining me today is Chad Roesle, Director Product Management for Services, Channel, Community, and Support at Secureworks. Welcome, Chad. So great to have you with us today.
Hi, Hilary. Great to be here. Thank you.
So, Chad, to start off, want to tell us a little bit about your role that I just mentioned at Secureworks?
Yeah, for sure. So I have product management responsibility for pretty much all of our services. So that does include our legacy counter threat platform or CTP services, as well as all of our Taegis-based services, including our managed XDR service, our professional services, and then also our incident response and adversary group type testing.
Excellent. And we're here to talk about MDR. So, Chad, can you define MDR for any of our listeners who may be unaware?
Yeah, absolutely. I like to reference, actually, Gartner has a really good definition that they use. And they basically say that, they define MDR services as being remotely delivered, typically a modern security operations center type of capabilities. They really focus around the detection, investigation, and active mitigation of cybersecurity incidents.
Excellent. So, with that context, what are the top challenges that MDR solves for folks?
Well, the top challenges, there's a few of them, right? I think one of the bigger ones is the amount of noise that we see today in threat detection platforms. If you look at SIEMs and other things like that, there's just really a lot of noise as far as the alerts that customers are receiving. And so it's hard to know which ones to pay attention to, which ones to ignore. And it's just generally difficult to keep up with everything going on. So I think helping to solve that by reducing the amount of noise and increasing the fidelity is certainly one. The other piece that managed XDR and MDR help to solve is really, we have a skills shortage in cybersecurity in the industry as a whole today. Millions of jobs have gone unfilled for several years now and projected to continue that way for some time. And so with an MDR type of service, the customers are able to really leverage their service provider to kind of extend their team, help them to kind of do some of the day-to-day monitoring and triage and investigation of the alerting so that their teams can focus more on the internal aspects of what they're doing.
And so you mentioned organizations, what should they be considering when they're evaluating those MDR offerings? I guess to elaborate further on what you just shared.
Sure. Yeah. So there's kind of 5 things that I look at. The first couple, 2 to 3 of them are really more technology focused. And then the last few are more on the people service side of things. So just to run through them, first is visibility, right? So it's really important, as a customer to make sure that your MDR service is going to be able to see what's going on. And so that means it's really important to have comprehensive telemetry that's being ingested into the system. A lot of people today assume that's strictly around the endpoint. Certainly endpoint is very, very important, but there's also network, cloud, email, containers, identity, all kinds of things, right? That the more context you provide into the MDR service, the better off you're going to be as far as getting high fidelity types of information. So that's one thing. The other is really the detection and the efficacy of what the MDR service is able to provide. Again, going back to my comments about the noise, right? You want to make sure that they have good detection, good capabilities, they have good threat intelligence. So where is the threat intelligence coming from? Is it global in view as far as what's going on across the landscape around the world? Is it automatically updated so that the customer doesn't have to worry about that? What types of analytics are they doing, right? Are they using data science to be smart, to know when certain alerts are high confidence that there's an issue versus really just noise, right? So certainly that's important as well. Shifting over to more on the people side of things, kind of the third one that I look at is around response. As a MDR customer, one of the things that's really important is to understand how do you want to work with your MDR provider when there is an issue, right? So you want to understand what sort of options do you have as far as how you interact with them. MDR providers will take action automatically on behalf of their customers. So does the MDR service provide that as an option? Things like isolating a host, blocking an IP address, killing a process, things like that. So certainly want to understand if they can do those actions for you, and then how you would want that to occur, right? Do you want them to notify you first and get your permission, or do you want them to just go ahead and do it? Do you want to use automation so that it maybe happens without even an analyst ever looking at the alert, things like that? The fourth one is really, I think, more around the expertise, right? There's a lot of folks out there now that are touting their MDR services. And so you want to make sure that it's someone that knows what they're doing, that has some background in security services. So when an incident does occur, because it's really less of an if and more of a when, you want to make sure it's somebody that's been there, they know what's going on, and they'll be able to help you, right? So being able to collaborate with them in those types of environments. I also think from an expertise standpoint, threat hunting is very, very important, in my opinion, for any good MDR service. And when I say threat hunting, I actually mean human-led threat hunting. There are some MDR services that have what they call automated threat hunting. My opinion personally is that that's really more of a detection and less of a threat hunting. But the threat hunting is important because no detection system is 100% perfect. And things are changing every day. And so, even if it was perfect yesterday, it's not going to be perfect tomorrow. And so that threat hunting helps to kind of dig up anything that gets through the detection and make sure that threat actors aren't in your environment for an extended period of time. And then also along the expertise, when an incident occurs, you want to have experts that can help you with kind of the data forensics of how they got in, where have they been in your system, what data have they exfiltrated, all those sorts of things, right? So you want to have access to a good IR team. And then the fifth one that I really look at is around the partnership. MDR is really the core piece of most customers' security strategy. It shouldn't be the only piece, but it is a very kind of core piece of that. So we want to make sure it's a partner that you can work with. They'll interact with your teams. They'll help to up-level the skills of your team. Hopefully they will educate you as far as what's happening in the security landscape and potentially give you pointers and advice on things that you could do to improve overall security posture within the customer. So those are kind of the five things.
Fantastic. And so in addition to that, how can organizations maximize the value of MDR? I guess if, they've done the process of evaluating it, they've decided it's for them, how can they maximize the value?
So I think what's most important, right? So I just listed off 5 different criteria that I think are important. I think what's really most important from a customer's perspective to make sure that they get maximum value is to start from the beginning, understanding what are the outcomes that they hope to achieve. What value do they need to receive from the MDR service and how do they want to achieve that so that they can go into all their conversations with the MDR providers to make sure that they check all the boxes and that sort of thing. So as far as maximizing value, I would say the single most important thing is really understanding what you want to accomplish up front so that you can make sure that you are going to be able to achieve that with whichever provider you end up going with.
And Chad, my final question for you, in addition to what you've already shared, what questions should buyers be asking of prospective MDR providers?
It's going to vary from one customer to the next as far as what's most important to them. A few that I think come up quite often that I think are very important. Again, going back to that visibility that I mentioned at the beginning, right? What systems does the MDR service provider, what do they integrate with? Do they have a fixed stack and they require that you utilize their systems? Or do they have a list of third-party integrations that they support that you can integrate with? And if so, do you use those systems? Which ones do they not support that you have in your tech stack, right? So very important to understand where the gaps are there, because again, that goes to really to the visibility. I think the other important question to ask is really around the automation and the response capabilities, making sure that the MDR service will be able to integrate with your internal processes, right? They're kind of be an extension of your team. And so you want to make sure that, they can work with your ticketing system if you have one and be able to integrate with your processes so that when an incident does occur, there's a seamless transition from your provider to you with the amount of information you need and that they're taking the steps that you want them to take before they come to you and that sort of thing, right? So I would say those are probably the 2 biggest questions that I would be asking.
Wonderful. Well, Chad, thank you so much for taking the time to join us today and to lend us your expertise. This has been really informative, and I'm sure our audience feels the same way. So just thank you so much.
Great. Thank you, Hillary. Appreciate it.